I don't know if specifically Gil. I don't know if you're familiar at all with. Okay, you've known me for what 20 years now, so you have to know Thomas Sowell at least peripherally, right? Because I've brought him up like ad nauseum.
Yeah,
Oh,
I definitely know him for sure.
okay, so Thomas Sowell has been talked about, in terms of this issue of like hatred toward Jews and like basically hatred toward minorities because he's a black man and so on and so forth. And uh, one of the most so first of all, one of the most interesting things that I've ever heard was somebody asking him the question, what can the Jews do to curb hatred toward them? And Thomas Sowell's answer was literally one word, and the word was fail.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah, all the Jews need to do is start failing. And he actually wrote this whole essay, which is really interesting, about how the prejudice of middleman minorities pops up. And this isn't just about the Jews, it's about like the Armenians, and the Chinese in various areas around China when they immigrate and so on and so forth. But I mean, specifically with the Jews, uh, I mean, anybody who knows anything about history knows that Jews were not actually allowed to own property in Europe for like centuries, right? Like the Merchant of Venice, written by Shakespeare. And by the way, I'm a major Shakespeare fan, but Shakespeare was probably a major anti-Jew guy.
Yeah,
When,
the Merchant of Venice.
when when he was writing The Merchant of Venice, because Shylock uh, is portrayed as the villain, but during that time in Venice, Jews weren't allowed to own property, so they literally needed to make their money through finances. They just needed to, it's like everything that everybody says against like hedge fund managers and everything like that. Oh, these are people who are making money by moving money around. Like they're not actually doing anything other than moving money around. Yeah, that was the only thing that the Jews could do in Venice and
So
still
if
make a
I'm not
living.
mistaken, I mean, it was also a thing that like Christians were very like found money to be like sort of like dirty business. So it's oftentimes the
Well,
non-Christians who would do it, and the Jews were like the obvious choice because they were spread out all through Europe.
yeah. I mean, in Islam particularly, it's very explicitly said in the Quran that it's a sin to charge interest on loans.
Yeah.
And
How
you know,
oddly specific.
so uh, so yeah, I mean, it was it's the Jews, just like the Armenians, just like Chinese immigrants, just like uh, so many other people fall into that category of middleman minorities. And you can kind of see how people build a philosophical target there. And that's a problem.
It is an interesting discussion because I've heard many things about the theories for like why Jews were hated over the years, but it is kind of feels like that Jews were the first like what you would call like successful nomads. Like they're essentially
Yeah.
they tended to like move around.
Yeah.
And they moved around in order to be successful, actually. Like, the whole story of like the reason why they went to Egypt is they because there was a drought in Canaan, right? And where Israel is, and so they went to Egypt, and we don't know Exodus, the story of Exodus, how accurate it is, but basically
Pretty damn
archaeological,
accurate.
not too accurate, but like there's archaeological findings that there were Semitic like tribes that moved from Canaan to Egypt, and they actually and they became very very successful there over the decades.
Yeah.
And there's even a dynasty of rulers that were what would be the the Jews of the time, like the Semites. Like they literally moved to Egypt and then got into positions of power and eventually took over the government. And that was the reason, or at least the story of Exodus. That's why they were kicked out. Like that the natives said, like, what's up with these like, people that are like, second, third, fourth generation immigrants essentially that are taking over our country. So they made all these laws. This was what happens to Jews all over the world. They go someplace, they become very successful, and I don't know if it's the nomadic nature of that they have, and the fact that they're very there's like an argument that they were one of the first people to write, to read and write, to have like written um, the alphabet and stuff. And maybe all those things were advantages that like wherever they went, they just within a few generations they become extremely successful and oftentimes get into position of power because if you're successful. And people that are native don't like that. Like it sucks. Like it sucks that like you just moved here a generation ago and already like, all your kids are like doctors and lawyers and successful. Meanwhile, your family is here for like 10 generations and you're still poor. It's the envy is it's understandable. And I
Yeah.
think Jews were the
Yeah.
original ones that did that. But since then, Chinese, like you said, like you have like Japanese, Chinese, like you have a lot of like immigrant groups. Like now, it's also like the Indians that that come and like become very successful in the U.S. and Canada. Become like computer engineers and things like that. You come from these like backgrounds where whatever it is, the education, the literacy. Chinese people are very good with math. I think it has to do with their language structure, things like that.
Also the culture, just
The culture of like being obsessed with like education. Yeah, for sure. Whatever it is, they have some edge on certain groups. Like they actually like are more successful than white people in the U.S. Like forget like minority groups that it pisses people off.
Have you guys seen the video that somebody made in addressing that ridiculous crap that they started saying in like college acceptance things and various other groups? They're now publicly saying that Asian people are no longer a minority group. They're considered white.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened to Jews.
No, but I'm saying there's a video where some people made in response to that where they're reading the thing off as ridiculous as it is and it's saying like it's an official letter whatever regarding their policies and whatever and saying that like Asian people are no longer considered a minority group, which doesn't make any sense. And then it says that they and then to double down on that, it actually literally says that they're considered white. And it just cuts to these Asian guys and they all look at each other and go, what? And then it smash cuts to them like doing a whole but like a series of really funny things. The one that made me laugh the most is this Asian guy walking past a cop car and just like waving at the cops like what up. But yeah, it was pretty fun. Just a bunch of stuff that's stereotypically considered to be like white privilege.
I should have like Little Dicky like redo the video of like it's nice to be a white.
Yeah,
like and do it with like an Asian friend with him tagging
that would
along
be
the entire
very
video.
very funny. Yeah.
I was actually just thinking, and I just want to put this out there before I completely blank on this. This might actually be a fun conversation about, like, when are we going to talk about movies in a way where, like, okay, we're movies that do it well in terms of history, in respecting the audience, but still just like getting to the point. Movies that respect the audience too much and put a bunch of history into the movie that the audience isn't going to get, and movies that kind of spend way too much time, like, with the palm out, like, okay, we're just going to feed you all the history that you probably already know, and just kind of go from there. Like, it's just one of those weird things. I mean, Israel is one of those things where I kind of expect that 75% of Americans don't know what the fuck is going on there.
Honestly, I barely know, and I grew up there. Like, I mean, I don't know
Well,
all the details. I have a
I'm being generous.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the fuck is going on there, like, half the time. But I mean, just think about movies like Gettysburg. There's a setup at the beginning of the movie where it's just like, okay, the Confederacy is moving this way. The Northern Army and they're converging on this spot, and this is what's going to be going on from this point in the movie. And you still have 4.5 hours of movie to deal with all the shit that actually happened over those 3 days. But I mean, that wasn't patronizing to the audience or anything like that. But um, it's just one of those things where it is a really thin line to toe, right? When you're making a historical drama of, like, how much am I expecting my audience to actually know coming in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, I don't even know if the average Gen Zer or Zoomer or whatever the fuck you call them, like, knows what decal was.
I would say that if we're going to base it off of the numerous viral videos where people are on the street asking people questions, I would say that since you see a lot of them that can't name, any the countries in North America, I would say that there's a pretty good bet that that a lot of people in this country can't find Israel on a map. So
Yeah, although I do wonder sometimes. I listen to the Bill Maher podcast, and one of the he often
I
likes
love that podcast.
yeah, no, it's one of
I
my favorites for
love
sure.
that. I
it's
love
just
that so
it's just
much.
like the way he talks to people. It just kind of brings out like just very casual discussions with people that like you wouldn't usually have in interviews.
Yeah.
But in any case, and he's also very very open. But the thing he likes to go back on way too many times is like, which kind of makes him seem like a grumpy old man. Is the whole thing where it's like, today's kids, like they don't know this, they don't know that. Every generation says that about, like, other. There's always going to be obviously a lot of smart people of certain generations, and there's always going to be dumb ones. And I think more than anything, obviously, you want to have curiosity and you want to try and constantly learn. And actually, I was going to say, like, I noticed that in the suggestions for like similar movies, there's another movie called Golda from 2019. That's a documentary, and I was like, I should check it out. It's free on Tubi. But yeah, because like I'd seen this movie I'm curious to know more about like how she rose to power and what was the circumstances. Like I want to know because I barely knew. I was pretty sure she was on the left, but I wasn't 100% sure. You see, like even like that kind of a detail, I wasn't sure. So so I think generally, just more than anything, yes, maybe some people don't learn too much stuff in school, or whether the curriculum just sucks. But I think hopefully, and that's the goal, I guess, like at least with me with my kids, is you want to foster curiosity. You have like, these devices, like these phones, and you have streaming, you have all this content available. And if you stay a curious person and a worldly person, and you want to learn about history, about like technology, about various things, that's all that matters. And I'm sure somebody will grab me on the street and trip me up with like certain questions. Maybe not like, can you name some countries in North America? Like not a question that stupid. But I mean, somebody can ask me like, where's Ukraine? And I like, is it south or north of something country? And I might mess that up. I might not know. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe and it's a little confusing. But yeah, so I try to like be very I think generous as far as like, not giving too much crap to like newer generation and not be a grumpy old man about it.
I don't try. I'm a grumpy old man.
Right, and I'm the youngest, and I'm probably the grumpiest.
Yeah, I guess it's not an old man; it's just a grumpy thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I will say that, there was a bar that I frequented in DC, and one of the bartenders was from Mongolia. And at one point, I was just like the only guy there at the bar, and I got to talking to her, and she was talking about being from Mongolia and like how nobody knows where Mongolia is. And I was just like, what? South of Russia, east of Kazakhstan, north of China. Like, I mean, she looked at me like I was from Mars because I actually knew that.
If you've played Risk a lot, you know where Mongolia is.
Right. It's a pretty big freaking country, and also, the way back is one of my.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that helped.
Right, in the pocket favorite movies and everything like that. But
I've never seen it.
Wait, you said she was a she?
Yeah.
Like that. I wonder if she was like, oh, that's so hot.
I don't know. Maybe.
But
hey, you never know. Like sometimes certain things tickle people.
But I mean, there's but on the other end, there is a thing of I keep bringing this up, that intelligence is ageless. Like you can be a prodigy at the age of 4. Like you could be somebody who somehow understands calculus, in the 4th grade. You can be somebody who somehow can put quantum theory into understandable terms at an amazingly young age. But wisdom is something that actually takes time. Wisdom is not something that you can have in the 4th grade. Wisdom takes experience. And by the way, I think that's one of the more brilliant parts of Oppenheimer, is that Oppenheimer, the film Oppenheimer, was dealing with somebody who was just fucking brilliant the entire time. And the antagonist Strauss even saying, like, how is somebody who is so capable of seeing so far not capable of seeing what was right in front of him, and so on and so forth. So much of the brilliance of Oppenheimer is the fact that they're dealing with a brilliant mind that was not wise throughout so much of his life. And I think that a lot of this ties into Golda, in that Golda, I think that she was a legitimately brilliant person. Like, she was definitely high IQ and not, she wasn't the governor of New Mexico at this point. Like, that freaking moron. She was a smart person, but she was also wise. And a lot of people still have to deal with the fact that she was wise at that time, and that a lot of us younger people, and I'm 38 and I'm the youngest of the crew, and I am still not as wise as Golda was at that time. So there's a certain reverence to Golda that is in that movie that I really respect. That was probably a roundabout way of making a point, but
I think it's a good point. It kind of like brings us to landing, I think. But yeah, no, I think it's a good way to tie it in because often there's this whole discussion about like leaders being too old, the whole like Biden being against Trump again in like 2024. I am definitely not a fan of it, and I wish there was like younger, like Obama, like charismatic people that can come in and maybe even do a better job than Obama. But I just the idea of like a younger leader, like an up and comer, like that maybe doesn't have the wisdom and the experience of someone, but as long as he's, if like I said, back to the whole thing, if you're curious.
I mean, I'm Team Vivek, so
I'm definitely not, but
he's a populist. Come on.
Yeah.
But exactly, and he's a Trumper too. But in any case, but in any case, it's I think the idea is that with leadership, just like Golda was leaning, she was saying in the movie, like, I'm not a general, like I'm not a military person, I'm a prime minister. Like that's why she needed to lean on her military people. Same thing with like a leader. Like if you have let's face it, like the president of the United States and sometimes prime ministers too, like they're figureheads. They're like essentially like a Tony Robbins. Like they're kind of like a motivational speaker. Like they're a person at the head of the country that you want to feel good about. That's there. It's good for morale and all that. But as far as making decisions, even if they lack some experience, as long as they're cool in the head and they can take advice from the right people that have more experience, they can use their smarts to process the wisdom of people with more experience, but filter it through their smarts and their like perspective. Because sometimes sometimes having like a newer perspective, like a younger perspective, is a good thing. It goes back to the whole generational thing. Like you never know. Like it's I'm sure there's someone brilliant will come along and he'll be younger than us and he'll be like better than anybody expected. He'll be like a zoomer, so I hold hope that there's always like some good ones in each generation.
Well, I mean, like, case in point, like the Eagles Vikings game today. I mean, both of their head coaches are younger than any of us.
Interesting.
And I mean, it's actually been a trend in the NFL recently to, get head coaches who are
Like
younger and more innovative, and like so on and so forth. So